I'm Irene, navigating life at 30 with a mix of web design and motherhood. Our family nucleus was simple: me, my husband Mike, and our 2-year-old sunshine, Danny. Our world was comfortably wrapped within the walls of our home, which stood as a testament to the life we built together. Mike worked for my dad's company, a job he was proud of, and I carved pixels into designs for my home studio. Our routine was pleasantly mundane until one evening at my parents' house, where family dinners were more than just meals. They were gatherings punctuated by discussions, laughter, and, sometimes, life-changing announcements. "So, I've been thinking," my dad began, his voice commanding the room's attention. He was a self-made man, a pillar of wisdom in business suits. "We're expanding the company. There's a new branch opening in the neighboring city, and I want Mike to take the lead on this." Mike, who had always admired my dad, perked up immediately. His eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and determination. "Mr. Thompson, that's a fantastic opportunity. I'm all in." I felt a surge of pride and excitement. "That's wonderful news. We should all move there for the project duration. It's just a few months, and it'll be like a little adventure," I said, already envisioning our temporary life in a new city. Unexpectedly, Mike hesitated, casting a glance that didn't quite reach his usual confidence. "Actually, Irene, it might be better if you and Danny stay here. Moving could be a hassle for the little guy." His words hit me unexpectedly, like a cold splash of reality in our warm, cozy life. "But Mike, I thought we were in this together. And it's not like we have to uproot our lives. I can work from anywhere, and it would be a nice change for Danny." My dad nodded in agreement, his voice echoing my thoughts. "Mike, Irene has a point. The family should stick together in such times. And Irene's job gives her that flexibility." Mike seemed to be caught off guard, a nervous chuckle escaping him. "I was just joking. Of course, you both should come along." But that joke didn't sit right with me. It lingered in the air, an uninvited guest at our family dinner. The evening progressed with Dad and Mike diving into the logistics of the new business venture, but my mind was stuck on Mike's initial reaction. Why the hesitation? Why the reluctance? Later that night, after tucking Danny into bed, I found myself sitting across from Mike in our living room. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my mind. "Mike, about dinner tonight," I started, my voice a blend of confusion and concern. "You really caught me off guard, suggesting that Danny and I shouldn't join you. Is there something on your mind?" He looked up from his phone, meeting my gaze for the first time since we sat down. "Irene, I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that setting up a new branch will be demanding. I thought it'd be easier for you to stay put, avoid the stress of moving." I leaned forward, searching his face for the familiar comfort. "But we've always faced challenges together. That's what we do. Why would this time be any different?" Mike sighed, putting his phone down. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "You're right, we do. And we will. I guess I was just overthinking it. It was a silly thought, nothing more." His words were meant to reassure, but they hung heavy in the room, a reminder that something in our equation had shifted, however slightly. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs just when you think you've got it all figured out. Our little family was on the brink of a new adventure, or so I thought, until Danny, our 2-year-old bundle of joy, decided to rewrite our plans. It started with a mild fever, nothing too alarming at first, but it quickly escalated. I remember holding Danny in my arms, feeling his little body burning up as I dialed our family doctor. "Dr. Jacobs, Danny's fever isn't coming down. I'm really worried," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. After a thorough checkup, Dr. Jacobs' expression was serious. "Irene, I'm afraid it's more than just a common cold. Danny needs rest and cannot travel for a while. Moving to a new city is out of the question right now." The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I called Mike that evening, the weight of uncertainty heavy in my voice. "Mike, Danny's sick. The doctor advised against traveling. We can't join you for now." On the other end, there was a pause before Mike responded. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Oh, is it serious? Well, that's okay, Irene. He needs to get better. We can manage." Something about his response didn't sit right with me. There was an undertone of relief, perhaps even contentment, that Danny and I wouldn't be joining him. It gnawed at me, that unsettling feeling of doubt. The weeks that followed were tough. Danny's illness turned out to be a stubborn infection that took its time healing. My days and nights merged into a blur of caregiving, leaving little room for anything else. Mike's calls became infrequent, and when he did call, his words felt rehearsed, lacking the warmth I was used to. "Everything's okay here, Irene. Just busy with work. How's Danny?" I'd update him, hoping for more engagement, but the conversations were brief and perfunctory. "He's getting better, slowly. We miss you, Mike." "Yeah, I miss you guys too," he'd reply, but it sounded hollow, as if he was saying it out of obligation rather than feeling. The distance was growing, not just in miles, but in our connection. It felt like Mike was slipping away, retreating into a world I wasn't part of. One evening, after a particularly short and unsatisfying call with Mike, I sat in the living room long after Danny had fallen asleep. The silence of the house echoed my thoughts. Was this what our life was going to be now? Mike distant and preoccupied, and me, alone, holding down the fort? Days turned into weeks, and the distance between Mike and me felt more than just miles apart. It was as if he was slowly drifting away, becoming a stranger. His calls, once filled with laughter and warmth, were now just formal check-ins. One evening, as I was putting Danny to bed, my phone buzzed. It was Mike. "Hey, how's Danny doing?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual tenderness. "He's better, still recovering," I replied, hoping to stir some emotion in him. "Work's crazy here," he said, sounding distracted. I sat down in the living room, the silence engulfing me. "Mike, we barely talk these days. Is everything okay with you? You seem different." There was a pause on the line. "Different? No, I'm just really busy, Irene. You know how it is starting up a new branch." I tried to keep the conversation going, to bridge the growing gap. "I understand you're busy, but it feels like you're not just physically away. It's like I don't know you anymore." He let out a sigh. "Irene, you're overthinking it. It's just stress, that's all. Once things settle down here, it'll be better." But his reassurances did little to ease my growing concerns. His words felt empty, devoid of the connection we once shared. Weeks passed, and Mike's brief return home did little to quell my fears. He was physically present but emotionally distant. He spent most of his time either working on his laptop or engrossed in his phone. One night, I decided to confront him. "Mike, we need to talk. You've been distant ever since you took this new job. Is there something you're not telling me?" He looked up from his phone, his expression a mix of annoyance and surprise. "Irene, why do you keep saying that? I'm right here." "But you're not really. You're always on your phone or laptop. It's like you're here, but your mind is somewhere else," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. Mike closed his laptop with a sigh. "Look, Irene, I've got a lot on my plate right now. The new branch, the pressures from your dad, it's a lot to handle. I'm just trying to do my best." I nodded, trying to understand. "I get that, Mike, but we're a team, remember? If there's something bothering you, you can talk to me." He shook his head, a half-smile on his face. "There's nothing to talk about, Irene. I'm just busy, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing." But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a chasm was forming between us, one that I couldn't bridge, no matter how hard I tried. The day started routinely enough, with the familiar hum of my computer and the soft breathing of Danny during his nap. I was deep in thought, maneuvering through the complexities of a web design project, when a knock at the door jolted me back to reality. Opening it, I found myself face to face with a stranger, his eyes weary yet determined. "Can I help you?" I asked, curiosity mingling with a hint of apprehension. "Yes, you're Irene, Mike's wife, right?" "I'm David." His voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of nervousness. I nodded, still unsure where this was going. "That's me. What is this about?" David took a deep breath, as if bracing himself. "I believe your husband, Mike, is having an affair with my wife." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. "That's impossible," I stammered, disbelief clouding my thoughts. Mike wouldn't do that. There's got to be some mistake. I thought the same at first, David admitted, reaching into his pocket. But then I found this. He handed me his phone, his hand shaking slightly. The photos displayed on the screen were heart-wrenching. There was Mike, undeniably him, in a series of intimate moments with a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing, embracing, their closeness leaving no room for doubt. I felt my world spin as I handed back the phone. Why are you showing me this? My voice cracked, barely a whisper under the weight of my crumbling reality. David's gaze was sympathetic yet firm. Because you deserve to know the truth. And I think we should do something about it. A mixture of emotions surged through me, anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. What do you mean, do something about it? He leaned against the door frame, his posture suggesting a man who had nothing left to lose. I have a plan. A way to confront them, to bring this out into the open. I can't just let this go, and I don't think you should either. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to shut the door and pretend this never happened, but another, stronger part knew I couldn't live with the uncertainty. What kind of plan? We need more evidence, something undeniable. I propose we catch them together, in the act, David explained, his voice laced with a mix of pain and resolve. The idea was daunting, yet it resonated with the part of me that craved closure. How would we do that? I know where and when they meet. If you're willing, we can confront them, together, he proposed, his eyes searching mine for a decision. The thought of facing Mike in such a scenario was terrifying, yet the need for the truth, for some semblance of control in the chaos, was overpowering. Okay, I'm in. I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As David left, I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of the decision I had just made. The path ahead was fraught with pain and uncertainty, but I knew there was no turning back. The truth was out there, and I had to face it, for my sake and for Danny's. The reality of what David and I were about to do hit me as we sat in the dimly lit apartment next door to Mike's. We were there to unveil the truth, using the thin walls to our advantage. The apartment, ironically provided by my father's company for Mike, was now the stage for uncovering his betrayal. David was setting up a small recording device, his hands steady but his eyes betraying a storm of emotions. Can't believe it's come to this, he muttered, more to himself than to me. I nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Neither can I. But we need to know, right? As we waited, the silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and questions. Then, the sound of a door opening next door broke the stillness. My heart skipped a beat, and I saw David tense up. That's them, he said, his voice barely a whisper. We moved closer to the wall, straining to hear. The voices were muffled at first, but then clearer. It was Mike, his laughter unmistakable, mingling with a woman's voice, his mistress. I clenched my fists, fighting back a surge of emotions. The intimacy in their voices was like a knife twisting in my heart. Are you getting this? David asked, his voice tight with anger. I nodded, holding the recorder close to the wall. Yes, it's all being recorded. The sounds from the other side of the wall continued, laughter, conversation, and then unmistakably more intimate noises. It was excruciating to sit there, hearing Mike betray our family so blatantly. But amid the heartache, there was a growing sense of resolve. We were gathering the evidence we needed, undeniable proof of their betrayal. After what felt like an eternity, the noises ceased, and a heavy silence fell over our makeshift surveillance spot. David and I exchanged a look, a mix of sorrow and determination in our eyes. We have what we need, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Now we confront them. David nodded, his jaw set. Let's do it now. No point waiting. As we stood up, I felt a strange sense of empowerment mixed with dread. The life I had known with Mike was over, and confronting him was the first step into a new, uncertain future. We need to catch them off guard, David said as we moved toward the door. I agreed, clutching the recorder like a lifeline. Let's go. It's time they faced the consequences. Stepping out of the apartment, the weight of the moment settled on my shoulders. We were about to face the people who had turned our lives upside down. The confrontation would be painful, but necessary. David and I stood in the dimly lit corridor outside Mike's apartment, our hearts racing with a mix of anxiety and determination. The plan was simple, but bold. David would pretend to be a courier, a ruse to ensure Mike would open the door. David knocked firmly, announcing loudly enough to be heard through the door, "Delivery." We heard footsteps approaching from inside. The door swung open, and there stood Mike, his face transitioning from annoyance to shock as his eyes landed on me. "Irene? What the hell are you doing here?" I took a deep breath, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need to talk, Mike. Can I come in?" Behind Mike, the mistress, a young woman with a startled expression, stood frozen. Reluctantly, Mike stepped aside, allowing us entry. The room felt tense, charged with unspoken accusations and fear. Without mincing words, David confronted Mike. "We know about the affair, Mike. You can drop the act." Mike's reaction was a mix of defensiveness and scorn. This is nothing. She seduced me. I was just caught up." His mistress, now visibly shaken, retorted, "What? No, you were as much in this as I was." Ignoring her, Mike turned to me, trying to downplay the situation. "Irene, listen, this isn't what it looks like." I couldn't hold back any longer. "Not what it looks like?" "I heard everything, Mike. We have recordings." Mike glanced at the recording device in David's hand, his face turning pale. "Recordings? Irene, you've got to understand." "There's nothing to understand," I cut him off, my voice rising in anger. "You betrayed our family, Mike. You betrayed me and Danny." He started to say something but stopped, realizing the gravity of his situation. "Irene, please," Mike's voice trailed off as he fell to his knees, a pathetic figure of desperation. "Forgive me, I made a mistake. Please, don't tell your father about this." I looked down at him, feeling a mix of pity and revulsion. "You think I can just forgive and forget? I'm going to demand compensation for this betrayal. And yes, I will tell my father. He deserves to know the kind of man you really are." Mike's face crumpled in despair, but there was no going back. The trust we had was shattered beyond repair. David, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "You're going to pay for this, Mike. Both of you." The mistress, now crying, looked completely overwhelmed. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." As we left the apartment, leaving Mike and his mistress to their own messy reality, I felt a strange sense of closure. It was painful and heart-wrenching, but necessary. The confrontation was over, and with it, a chapter of my life had ended. Stepping out into the brisk evening air, the weight of what had just transpired in Mike's apartment hung heavily over me. David and I walked in silence to a nearby park bench. The noise of the city around us felt distant, muffled by the shock and turmoil churning inside. David was the first to break the silence. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Irene. But at least now you know the truth." I nodded, feeling numb. "Yes, the truth." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "What are you going to do now?" He looked down, his hands clenched tightly. "I need to think. There's a lot to process. But one thing is clear, I can't stay with her after this." "I understand," I said softly. The reality of my own situation was beginning to sink in. I need to start planning for a life without Mike, for Danny's sake. David looked at me, empathy in his eyes. "If you need anything, any help, just let me know." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you, David. I appreciate it." We sat there for a while longer, lost in our own thoughts, before parting ways. As I walked back to my parents' house, where Danny was staying, the magnitude of the situation hit me. My marriage was over, and the life I had known was shattered. When I arrived, my parents immediately sensed something was wrong. "Irene, what happened? You look upset," my mom asked, concern etched on her face. I sighed, not sure where to begin. "Mom, Dad, I found out Mike has been having an affair." The room went silent. My dad's expression hardened. "Are you sure?" I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Yes, I'm sure. I heard them, and I have recordings." My mom reached out, taking my hand. "Oh, Irene, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do? I'm going to file for divorce, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I can't be with him after this. It's over. My dad, always the protector, spoke up. He won't get away with this. I'll make sure of that. And you and Danny will always have a home here. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, grateful for their support. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you both. The final chapter of my marriage to Mike was written in a lawyer's office, amidst a sea of paperwork and legal jargon. The divorce process was grueling but necessary. I fought hard, with my lawyer by my side, to ensure that Danny and I would have the financial security we needed. The court granted me alimony and compensation for Mike's betrayal, a small solace in the wake of our shattered life. Meanwhile, David, the man who had been thrust into my life by our shared misfortune, also finalized his divorce. His wife, once living a life of luxury, now faced a starkly different reality. She had to trade her affluent lifestyle for a job as a saleswoman in a retail store, a harsh consequence of her actions. As for Mike, the repercussions of his infidelity were far-reaching. My father, once a mentor and supporter, was ruthless in his response. He not only fired Mike from the company, but also made it clear that he would use his influence to prevent Mike from securing a position in any reputable firm. The man who once had a promising career now juggled two menial jobs, struggling to make ends meet. Life after the divorce was a journey of healing and rediscovery for me. I focused on raising Danny, ensuring that the upheaval in our lives didn't dim his bright, innocent spirit. Watching him grow, laugh, and explore the world was a balm to my bruised heart. My work as a web designer provided not just a financial lifeline but also a welcome distraction. I threw myself into my projects, finding joy and fulfillment in creating and designing. It was a reminder that despite the chaos, I still had control over some aspects of my life. My parents were my rock during this time. They provided unwavering support, offering a safe haven for Danny and me. "You're stronger than you realize, Irene," my dad would often say. And as time passed, I began to believe him. In the quiet moments, often after I had put Danny to bed, I would reflect on the tumultuous journey. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it was slowly being replaced by a newfound strength and independence. I had navigated through the darkest of times and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but certainly stronger. As I closed the chapter on a painful part of my life, I opened a new one, filled with possibilities and the promise of a fresh start. My journey was not over, it was merely taking a new path, one that I was ready to travel with hope and determination.